Correo TV. I am Isabel Inclán, the editor-in-chief of Correo Canadiense newspaper. And today, we will talk about the reality of the refugee journalists here in Canada. Our guest today is James Cullingham. He is the director of the documentary, The Cause of Freedom, about the life of 3 refugee journalists here in Canada. Welcome, James.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
It's a pleasure having you here in this program because I know you are a documentary filmmaker, historian, and journalist. And James Cullingham, his documentaries concerning social justice, history, and popular culture has been screened around the world. To start this interview, James, I will ask you why to put your camera on 3 refugee journalists here in Canada. Why you want to tell that story?
I met some of the journalists in the last 5 years or so, and I was very struck and moved by their stories and by their courage, particularly meeting first Luis Horacio Najera, and then the Turkish journalist in exile, Arzu Yildiz, who are in the film. You know, working in Canada, and I've worked independently, I've worked for the CBC, I filed for different newspapers. I've traveled widely in different parts of the world, but of course, always with a Canadian passport. And I had the relative security of the stability of Canadian society. I realized meeting my colleagues, the 3 that are in the film, from Mexico, Syria, and Turkey. Now in Canada, I realized that their lives had been very, very different. They'd been forced to flee their countries. And when I traveled working in places like Palestine and Israel and South Africa, I was working with colleagues in Pakistan, for example. I realized that the situation of many journalists is very different. And I wanted to make a film about the experience of those 3 individuals who are profiled in the film, their struggles to build a new life and career in Canada. That's the focus of the film.
Okay, and this film, The Cause of Freedom, focus, as you mentioned, on the life of Luis Horacio Najera from Mexico and Abdulrahman Matar from Syria and Arzu Yildiz from Turkey. Can you profile their experience just shortly to know more about them?
Sure. Luis was based in Juarez. He worked extensively for a major newspaper chain in Mexico. He was covering crime. He was covering corruption. His life was threatened. His family's lives were threatened, and they came to Canada. In the case of Arzu Yildiz, she was a political and legal reporter, both for broadcast and print in Turkey. And when there was the coup, or no one's quite sure whether to call it a coup and to what extent the government engineered it itself, but in the tumult that occurred in the summer of 2016, she was identified as one of the journalists who, in the eyes of the government of Erdogan, was an enemy of the state. So she went into hiding, and then she eventually left. She had to leave her children behind. Fortunately, her children are now with her in Canada, and that story is told in the film. Abdulrahman Matar wrote about culture. He was a published poet. He was an analyst of political affairs in both Syria and in Libya, and he was persecuted in both countries. He was actually in jail for a considerable period of time, eventually fled to Saudi Arabia, then to Turkey, and then made his way to Canada via New York. So all 3 of these people have been in Canada from anywhere approximately a decade to 5 years, and are in various states of adjustment. None of them has found full-time work as a journalist yet, which is given the excellent work that they were doing in their home countries and their importance as journalists in those countries. It's disturbing to me as a Canadian journalist that they haven't been able to find full-time work in Canada.
This is the point. I had the opportunity to watch your documentary, The Cost of Freedom, and I really like it because you focus on them, three of them, and you show what they do in their country, but also what they are doing here in Canada. In Canada, they feel safe, of course, and they are living with their family in a nice life. It's okay, but they feel sadness. They feel loneliness because they are not working as a journalist. My question for you is what to do? What the government, what the organization of journalists, what the newspapers company, the media company, what to do to incorporate these journalists and other journalists, immigrant journalists in the media industry?
I think the industry has to be more receptive to people who perhaps speak with an accent, who have great knowledge of parts of the world that are important to Canadians, or should be. I mean, some analysts can tell you and quantify that generally Canadian listeners, viewers, readers are less interested in international news. That's not my experience. I think people are very curious. And whether it's Luis about Mexico, or Arzu about Turkey, or Abdulrahman about Syria and the Middle East generally, and the Arab world generally, these are people with great stores of knowledge. And maybe, you know, they wouldn't be able to appear suddenly as a host on a television program or as a reporter, but they can do very valuable research. They're all very qualified writers. Luis has just published a book that he co-authored, as you would know, with Peter Edwards.
Yeah, the Wolf
Pack.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that he wrote in English. Now Arzu and Luis their English is very strong, but still they're working in their second language. But in a digital world, that shouldn't be a barrier. And whether it's the CBC or a major newspaper chain or whatever, there are many ways that organizations could be profiting from the insights and the experience that these people have. I would say that the Canadian Journalists for Free Expression, Canadian Association of Journalists, PEN Canada, and others are very aware of this problem and the fact that there are probably, safe to say, at least 100 writers in exile, many of whom are journalists in Canada as we speak, seeking work. I think we need, as an industry, to find better, more compassionate ways to incorporate them into our industry for the benefit of our audiences.
Yeah, this is nice to hear what you say, because I can mention, you know, the New Canadian Media, they used to publish articles from the immigrant journalists. And in a recent study, they apply a survey with the immigrant journalists, and the journalists said, yes, we need more training and we need more opportunities, because usually when they apply in a media, as a reporter, probably they put an emphasis in the editors of the accent and the how many years in Canada, but not about the experience. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that we need to do more. And I applaud New Canadian Media and the others who are trying to remedy it. You know, in making our film, myself and my colleagues and the three journalists, I mean, that was one of our motivations, to get the message out there that these people are in the country. And I think what distinguishes the film is there are a number of fine films and books written about the experience of journalists under threat in various parts of the country. I think what's unique about the Cost of Freedom refugee journalists in Canada is to focus on, okay, you had to leave, what's next? And I think each of the three journalists, they're very courageous. I admire them hugely, but there is a frustration and a sadness in that they, you know, they are working as best they can, but they're not full-time employed. And in the case of at least two of them, they've been very busy at things that have nothing to do with journalism at all, whether it's working in a factory or delivering food. Now, that happens to a lot of people who come to Canada as an immigrant or a refugee. You would know better than I, but I think that generally, Canadians have to be more receptive to the expertise that people bring with them. And in the case of journalism, it just seems counterproductive when individuals like this have knowledge which would be beneficial to the audience in Canada, and they're not getting sufficient opportunity to have their voices or their writing published here. Hopefully that'll change, but it's not happening fast enough.
Yes, and I hope your documentary, The Cost of Freedom, that portray really well the situation, really nice, the situation of refugee journalists, immigrant journalists here in Canada. We have the experience, but we don't have the opportunity. So I really, really like it. And thanks you to take the time and your experience to focus your camera in that reality that many, many journalists we face here in Canada. The Cost of Freedoms, I know, will screen in the festival Reframe Film Festival, right? That is coming at the end of January 27 to February the 4th. They can watch, whatever the audience, they can watch The Cost of Freedom, right?
It's a virtual festival, and the film will be screening and it will be available everywhere in Canada, January 27th to February 4th, Reframe Film Festival, which is based where I am in Nogajiwanong, Peterborough. But for obvious reasons, pandemic reasons, it is a virtual festival, and the advantage is people can screen anywhere in Canada. So reframefilmfestival.ca.
Okay, James Cullingham, to wrap up this interview, I would like to ask you, what did you learn from these three journalists that you follow with your camera? Did you learn something from Horacio, from Arzu, from Abdulrahman, something that impacted you? And by the way, we need to mention, both of them are men, and one is Arzu is practically single mom or separate mom, and taking care for two girls, right? What did you learn from them?
Well, I admire their courage. I learned just how devoted they are to their families and to their professions. And I think the thing that impresses me and moves me most as a professional is that they won't give up journalism. Even though they're not making anywhere near the kind of money a professional should be making, they continue to tell stories, whether they've been delivering food or spending the night shift in a factory or cooking for their families. They find time to continue to research and continue to write and continue to network. And that to me is very, very impressive. They don't, they're not accepting the intimidation and the terror that they have experienced. They are taking advantage of the safety of Canada and continuing as storytellers. And I admire them hugely for that.
Okay.
And I think,
yes.
Yeah, just the other thing is that, in the course of making films, I can say that we've all become friends, and that has enriched my life to get to know them and their families to some extent. They're lovely people, and I've been very, very fortunate to be able to work with them, and I hope people will see the film, because I think they'll be very impressed by Luis, Abdulrahman, and Arzu, as I was.
Yeah, and I hope your film, The Cost of Freedom, really, really impact in the main of the editors and the people working in the media industry, that we really, really, we have the talent of immigrant journalists, refugee journalists with a lot of experience. And we hope that your documentary changed their mind, and as you mentioned, open their mind about the What about if they are really, really accepting immigrant journalists in their desk in the media industry, right?
Yes, let's hope so.
We hope so. Thanks for
Buena suerte.
buena suerte. We know you speak Spanish, and thanks to speak our language, we are honored that you have interest to speak in Spanish. Muchas gracias, James Cullingham. Thanks a lot for being here. And please continue doing what you want, what you do with your camera. Focus in the, as you mentioned, social justice and pop culture. We really, really enjoy. Thank you so much, James Cullingham.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, and see you in the next program, Correo TV. Thank you.